Ma'am, you know what that card is worth, right? Rachel Morgan looked down at the black card resting in her gloved hand, then back at the security guard standing behind the glass doors of Grantwall Tower. Snow moved sideways across downtown Boston, sharp enough to sting the narrow strip of skin between her scarf and coat collar. It was 11:38 at night, and she had been standing beneath the building's stone awning for more than 40 minutes. Her bus had already come. She had watched its red taillights disappear through the snow 12 minutes earlier. The guard glanced at the card again. Matte black. Heavy. A name embossed across the front in silver. Alexander Grant. I am serious, he said. Most people would not stand out here waiting. Rachel closed the leather wallet and tucked it beneath her coat to keep it dry. Most people probably have better shoes. The guard looked down at her worn black work sneakers, their toes already dusted white. You could leave it with me. Rachel hesitated. He seemed trustworthy. He had offered twice. But the wallet had not been his responsibility when she found it, and handing it to another stranger somehow felt like moving the worry instead of ending it. Does Mr. Grant still work this late? She asked. The guard gave a small smile. Mr. Grant works whenever Mr. Grant wants. Rachel rubbed her gloved hands together. The cold had started working through the seams of her coat 20 minutes ago. Then I will wait a little longer. The guard shook his head. That card could buy more than your car. Rachel thought of her car sitting behind the bakery 6 blocks away because the heater had stopped working again. She thought of the $12.63 in her checking account. The pharmacy coupon folded inside her purse. Lily's cough medicine waiting on a shelf somewhere between here and home. She looked at the wallet under her coat. It is worth belonging to someone else. The guard stared at her for a moment, then nodded slowly, as if that answer had surprised him. 2 hours earlier, Rachel had been wiping flour from the bakery counter while her manager counted the register. The shop closed at 9:30, but cleanup always stretched later. Rachel worked evenings because Mrs. Ellis upstairs could watch 6-year-old Lily until she got home. It was not ideal, but ideal had become a word Rachel stopped using after Lily's father moved 3 states away and gradually turned phone calls into holiday messages. At 10:15, Rachel left the bakery with a paper bag containing 1 unsold dinner roll and half a blueberry muffin the manager told her to take home. The temperature had dropped below 20 degrees. She pulled her scarf tighter and started toward the bus stop. That was when she saw the wallet near the curb, half covered by fresh snow. She almost walked past it. Then something silver caught the streetlight. Inside were several $100s in cash, an identification card, business cards, and the black card. Rachel knew enough to recognize the name. Alexander Grant was the billionaire founder of Grantwell Holdings, the kind of man whose face appeared in business magazines near words like expansion, acquisition, and record growth. For one quiet second, Rachel stared at the cash. Lily needed medicine. The electric bill was due Friday. The refrigerator held milk, eggs, and not much else. No one had seen Rachel pick up the wallet. No one would know. She closed it immediately. By 11, 3 calls to the numbers on the business cards had gone unanswered. So she walked nearly a mile to Grantwell Tower. Now, as the snow thickened around the entrance, headlights swept across the sidewalk. A black sedan stopped near the curb. The security guard straightened. Rachel watched the rear door open. A tall man in a dark overcoat stepped out, looking irritated until his eyes landed on the wallet beneath her arm. His expression changed instantly. He crossed the sidewalk toward her. Where did you get that? Rachel held it out. Near Tremont Street. Alexander Grant took the wallet with both hands, opened it, and ignored the black card completely. His fingers went straight to a hidden pocket inside the lining. He pulled out a faded Polaroid photograph and stopped breathing for half a second. Rachel saw the relief before he could hide it. Whatever mattered most in that wallet had never been the card. Alexander stared at the Polaroid for several seconds before sliding it carefully back into the hidden pocket. Only then did he look at Rachel again. Snow had gathered along the shoulders of her coat, and a strand of damp hair clung to her cheek. You waited out here for this? He asked. Rachel glanced toward the street where her bus had disappeared. I wanted to make sure it got back to you. You could have left it with security. I thought about it. But you did not. Rachel rubbed her hands together inside the thin gloves. I would have spent all night wondering if the right person got it. Alexander looked at the wallet, then at the black card still untouched in its slot. Nothing is missing. Rachel gave him a tired look. That is usually how returning something works. The security guard turned away to hide a smile. Alexander did not seem offended. If anything, he looked more puzzled. He reached into his overcoat and pulled out several folded bills. At least let me cover your trouble. Rachel immediately shook her head. No. You stood in freezing weather for almost an hour. That was my decision. You missed your bus. Her eyes narrowed slightly. How do you know that? The security guard answered for him. I may have mentioned it. Rachel sighed. Alexander held out the money again. Then let me pay for a cab. I said no. Why? Rachel looked at him as if the answer should have been obvious. Because I did not bring your wallet back to sell it to you. The words were not dramatic. That made them land harder. Alexander slowly lowered his hand. For a man used to people accepting favors before he finished offering them, the refusal seemed to leave him briefly, without a script. Then what do you need? He asked. Rachel almost laughed. What did she need? Heat in the Ford. A full refrigerator. A childcare bill that did not arrive before the paycheck. Enough medicine to get Lily through the week without choosing between groceries and the electric payment. Instead, she looked toward the snow-covered street. A bus that still runs. Alexander glanced at his watch. At this hour? There is a night route from Washington Street. That is over a mile from here. I know. In this weather? Rachel pulled her scarf tighter. The weather is not taking suggestions. Alexander studied her for another moment, then looked toward the black sedan at the curb. Let my driver take you. Rachel's expression closed immediately. I am not getting into a stranger's car. Fair. Alexander nodded toward the security guard. You know where she is headed? She said west toward Alston. Alexander looked back at Rachel. You can text the license plate to whoever is waiting for you. My driver can show you his identification. You can sit in the back alone. If you want out at any point, we stop. Rachel hesitated. The offer was careful enough to make refusing feel less necessary. More importantly, Lily was waiting. Just to Washington Street, she said. If the bus is still running. Agreed. 10 minutes later, Rachel sat in the heated back seat of the sedan with her hands slowly beginning to ache as feeling returned to her fingers. Alexander sat on the opposite side, leaving more space between them than required. Neither spoke until the car turned onto Boylston. The photograph, Rachel said quietly. Your mother? Alexander looked toward the window. Yes. I'm glad it was still there. His expression softened for the first time. So am I. The driver slowed at a red light, near a 24-hour pharmacy. Rachel noticed the glowing sign and leaned forward. Could you stop here for a minute? Alexander looked at her. Of course. Rachel stepped out before he could ask why. Through the window, he watched her hurry inside. At the register, she placed a bottle of children's cough medicine, a box of cereal, and a gallon of milk on the counter. Then she opened her wallet and counted what remained. Alexander saw her pause. The cereal went back first. The milk followed. She left with only the medicine in a small paper bag. When Rachel returned to the car, she tucked it quickly into her purse as if there were nothing unusual about the choice. Alexander said nothing. He only looked at the black wallet in his own hand and understood, for the first time that night, exactly what she had returned while having almost nothing to spare. The rest of the ride was quiet. Rachel sat with the small paper pharmacy bag tucked against her coat, watching snow gather along the edges of the windshield while Boston blurred past in white and amber streaks. Alexander kept his attention on the black wallet in his lap, but his thoughts stayed on the checkout counter. The cereal, the milk, the way Rachel had put both back without hesitation once she realized the medicine cost more than expected. He had spent most of his adult life around people who negotiated every advantage available to them. Rachel had stood in freezing weather with enough money in her hand to solve several immediate problems and returned all of it without asking for anything. At the corner of Commonwealth Avenue, Rachel leaned forward. This is fine. The driver glanced at Alexander in the mirror. You sure? Alexander asked. Rachel nodded. Mrs. Ellis lives in the building next to mine. I do not want the car blocking the entrance. Alexander almost asked why that mattered, then decided he had already asked enough questions for one night. The sedan stopped beside a narrow apartment building with snow piled against the curb. Rachel opened the door, then paused. Thank you for the ride. Alexander looked at her. Thank you for the wallet. She gave a small nod. Take better care of it. For the first time that evening, he smiled. Apparently I need to. Rachel stepped out and closed the door. Alexander watched her hurry toward the entrance, shoulders hunched against the cold. Just before she disappeared inside, she reached toward her neck and stopped. Her scarf was gone. Alexander looked down. A faded burgundy scarf lay across the seat beside him. "Should I take it after her?" the driver asked. Alexander picked it up. "No, she is already inside." He ran the fabric once through his hand, then folded it carefully. "We will return it tomorrow." The driver glanced at him through the mirror, but said nothing. Rachel climbed 3 flights of stairs and found Mrs. Ellis waiting in the hallway in slippers and a thick cardigan. "You are late," the older woman whispered. "Bus trouble." Lily woke up twice asking for you. Rachel's tired expression softened immediately. "How is her cough?" "Still there, but no fever." Rachel thanked her, crossed the hall, and unlocked the apartment. The living room lamp was still on. Lily slept curled beneath a yellow blanket on the couch, one small hand resting beside a picture book. Rachel set down her purse, removed the medicine, and stood there for a moment just watching her daughter breathe. The room was warm, but barely. The old radiator clicked every few minutes as if considering whether to keep working. Rachel touched Lily's hair gently. "I got it, sweetheart," she whispered. The child did not wake. Rachel moved to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Half a carton of eggs. Mustard. A little butter. 1 apple. She looked at the empty shelf where the milk should have been, then at the clock. 12:46 a.m. Payday was Friday. She could make it work until then. She always did. Across the city, Alexander entered his penthouse and placed the wallet on the kitchen counter. He removed the black card and set it beside the Polaroid. The photograph showed him at 14 beside his mother on Cape Cod, both laughing into the wind. It was the last picture of them together before illness changed everything in their family. He had nearly lost it because he had treated the wallet like just another object. Rachel had understood its value without ever knowing the story. Alexander opened his laptop, searched the name printed on the bakery receipt he had noticed sticking from her coat pocket, and found the shop's address. Then he stopped. The instinct came easily. Send groceries. Pay her rent. Arrange a new car. Fix the problem before breakfast. His fingers rested above the keyboard. Rachel's voice returned instead. "I did not bring your wallet back to sell it to you." Alexander closed the laptop. For once, money felt like the wrong first answer. At 7:10 the next morning, Rachel arrived at the bakery with her hair still damp from a rushed shower and Lily safely at school. A black sedan was parked at the curb. Her stomach dropped. When she stepped inside, Alexander Grant was already sitting at a corner table. Her burgundy scarf lay folded beside his coffee. Rachel stopped just inside the bakery door, one hand still wrapped around the cold metal handle. Alexander looked almost out of place beneath the warm pendant lights, seated at a small wooden table usually occupied by construction workers, college students, and parents rushing through breakfast. His charcoal overcoat was folded over the chair beside him. Her burgundy scarf rested neatly next to a white coffee cup. "You forgot this," he said. Rachel glanced at the scarf, then at him. "You came across Boston at 7 in the morning to return a scarf. You crossed downtown in a snowstorm to return my wallet. That was different. I am beginning to think you say that whenever someone tries to do something for you." Rachel set her bag behind the counter. Maybe because people usually want something afterward. Alexander did not answer immediately. The bakery was still quiet. Mrs. Harper, the owner, was in the kitchen checking the first trays of bread. The smell of cinnamon and fresh coffee softened the room, but Rachel remained guarded. She picked up the scarf. It was still slightly warm from being inside. "Thank you." Alexander nodded. "Can I ask you something?" "You already did." A faint smile touched his face. "Why did you put the cereal back?" Rachel's expression changed. "Not dramatically. Just enough." "You were watching me?" "I was sitting in the car." That was not an answer. "Yes, I saw." Rachel folded the scarf over her arm. "Then you saw me by what I needed. I saw you choose medicine over food." Her jaw tightened. "My daughter needed the medicine more." Alexander leaned back slightly, careful not to crowd her with his voice or presence. "Let me help." "You did. You brought me home." "That is not what I mean." "I know." He reached inside his coat, then stopped before taking anything out. "I could cover your rent for a year." Rachel stared at him. "No." "Or replace your car." "No." "Set up something for your daughter. School. Medical expenses. Whatever would make things easier." "Mr. Grant." "Alexander." "Alexander, no." The firmness in her voice made him go still. Rachel looked toward the kitchen, lowering her voice. I returned your wallet because it was yours. If you turn that into a transaction, then you change what happened. I'm not trying to buy what you did. Then do not make me feel like I sold it. That landed harder than she intended. Alexander looked down at his coffee. For several seconds, all Rachel heard was the refrigerator compressor humming behind the counter. You are right, he said finally. She had expected resistance. The simple admission disarmed her more than an argument would have. I am not very good at this, he added. At what? Helping without taking control of the outcome. Rachel studied him. There was no performance in his face now. No billionaire confidence. Just a man confronting a habit he had probably never needed to question. Then maybe start by asking instead of deciding. Alexander nodded once. All right. What would actually help? Rachel almost gave the answer she had given herself for years. Nothing. I will manage. But she thought of Mrs. Harper staring at spreadsheets after closing. She thought of Ben, who worked mornings before community college. Maria, who had 2 children and covered every Sunday shift. 6 employees depended on the bakery staying open. Not me, Rachel said. Alexander frowned. What? If you really want to help, do not make me the only person you suddenly notice. She pointed toward the small dining room, the worn counter, the kitchen beyond it. Mrs. Harper got a notice last week. The landlord says the rent is going up almost 40% next month. She says she cannot afford it. If that happens, this place closes. Alexander's expression sharpened, not with anger, but focus. When does the lease expire? I do not know. Has anyone reviewed it? She cannot afford a lawyer. He looked toward the kitchen door. Would she let someone from my legal team read it? Rachel hesitated. Read it. That is all. That is all. She held his gaze. No buying the building. No secret check. No making her feel like she owes you. Alexander gave the smallest nod. You make a lot of rules. You have a lot of money. Someone should. This time, he laughed quietly. Then Mrs. Harper stepped out carrying a tray of muffins, looked from Rachel to the billionaire at table 4, and nearly dropped her oven mitt. Rachel exhaled. This is going to be a very long morning. Mrs. Harper set the tray down so quickly that 2 muffins slid sideways on the parchment. Rachel, she whispered, keeping her eyes on Alexander. Is that who I think it is? Rachel tied on her apron. Probably. Alexander stood, polite enough to make the moment more awkward. Mrs. Harper? The bakery owner nodded slowly. Yes. Rachel mentioned you received a rent increase notice. Mrs. Harper looked at Rachel, then back at him. She did. Only because you asked what would actually help, Rachel said. I did not tell him anything else. Alexander reached into his coat, but this time he pulled out a business card instead of money. If you are comfortable with it, one of our attorneys can review your lease. No charge. No obligation. We would only tell you what it says and whether the increase is permitted under the current terms. Mrs. Harper stared at the card as if it might disappear. Why? Alexander glanced toward Rachel. Because someone reminded me that help works better when you ask first. Rachel busied herself arranging cups so he would not see the small change in her expression. Mrs. Harper took the card. I have the lease upstairs. You do not need to decide now. I decided last night that I could not make next month's rent. Her voice softened. I think I can decide this. By 8:30, Alexander had left for Grantwell Tower. By 9:15, Mrs. Harper had emailed a scanned copy of the lease to the address on the card. Rachel expected nothing more that day. Wealthy people, in her experience, moved quickly when something mattered to them and slowly when it mattered to someone else. At 11:40, Mrs. Harper's phone rang. She answered near the register, listened for less than a minute, then sat down. What? Rachel asked. Mrs. Harper covered the phone. They found something. The attorney explained it again on speaker. The lease had 3 years remaining. The landlord could increase certain shared operating costs each year, but the base rent could only rise by a fixed percentage on the anniversary date. The 40% increase in the notice was not supported by the contract. Mrs. Harper blinked. So I do not have to pay it. Not as written, the attorney said. We recommend responding formally and requesting an itemized calculation. We can draft the letter for your review. Mrs. Harper looked at Rachel with both hands pressed against her mouth. Rachel felt the tightness in her chest loosen, but only a little. There is no catch, she asked. The attorney paused. Mr. Grant gave clear instructions. Review the lease. Explain the options. Nothing beyond that unless Mrs. Harper requests it. Rachel looked toward the front window. Snowmelt ran in thin lines down the glass. She had expected Alexander to solve the problem by overpowering it. Instead, he had followed the boundary she gave him. That surprised her more than the legal answer. Across the city, Alexander sat at the end of a polished conference table while 12 executives discussed a vendor consolidation plan projected to save several $1,000,000. Usually, numbers sharpened his attention. That morning, one line kept bothering him. The proposal recommended replacing 3 local service contractors with a national company. What happens to the current workers? He asked. The room went quiet. His chief operating officer looked confused. The contracts end. I understand that. What happens to the people? A woman near the screen checked her notes. That was not part of the analysis. Alexander leaned back. 2 days earlier, he would not have noticed the omission. Now he saw Rachel putting cereal back on a pharmacy shelf. At it, he said, before we approve anything, I want to know how many workers lose hours, whether wages change, and whether the savings come from cutting benefits. Someone started to explain that the company had never required that level of review. Alexander interrupted gently. Then we require it now. At 3:20, his phone buzzed. A message from the attorney handling Mrs. Harper's lease appeared on the screen. The landlord had received the response and agreed to withdraw the increase pending a corrected calculation. Alexander read the message twice. His first instinct was to send Rachel the news himself. He stopped. This was not his victory to deliver. At the bakery, Mrs. Harper received the same message and began to cry quietly behind the register. Ben hugged her. Maria laughed from the kitchen. Rachel stood still, holding a coffee pot in one hand, feeling something unfamiliar settle over the room. Not rescue. Not charity. Relief. Her phone vibrated inside her apron. A short message from Alexander appeared. I hope the review helped. Rachel looked at it for several seconds before typing back. It did. Thank you for listening. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then his reply came. I am trying to learn how. 3 days later, Rachel found herself thinking about Alexander at the strangest moments. Not because he was a billionaire. That part still felt too large and too distant to fit inside her ordinary life. She thought about the fact that he had listened. Really listened. Mrs. Harper kept the bakery schedule taped beside the register, and for the first time in weeks no one had circled shifts in red with notes about possible closure. Ben still came in before class. Maria still brought homemade soup on Tuesdays. The coffee machine still made a terrible rattling sound every morning at 6. Nothing looked dramatically different. That was what made the relief feel real. Life had not transformed into a fairy tale. It had simply stopped slipping away. On Friday afternoon, Rachel picked Lily up from school and found a folded drawing inside her backpack. It showed Rachel behind the bakery counter, Lily beside her, and a tall stick figure wearing what appeared to be an enormous black coat. Who is that? Rachel asked. Lily looked surprised by the question. The man who brought your scarf back. Rachel stared at the drawing. How do you know about him? Mrs. Ellis told me. Rachel sighed. Mrs. Ellis knows too much. Lily smiled. Is he your friend? Rachel zipped the backpack. I do not know. It was the most truthful answer she had. Across Boston, Alexander was learning that listening created problems money had allowed him not to see. A report landed on his desk Friday morning, showing that several contract workers inside Grantwell Properties had no paid sick days. Another showed that overnight cleaning crews sometimes lost hours when buildings closed for private corporate events. None of it was illegal. That almost made it worse. He had spent years measuring whether systems were efficient. Rachel had made him wonder whether efficiency was enough. At 11:15, he called his chief operating officer. I want a review of every contract labor policy connected to our properties. For cost reduction? No. Alexander paused. For people? Silence followed. What exactly are we measuring? Schedule stability. Emergency support. Wage gaps. Benefits. Anything we would care about if our names were on the hourly timesheets instead of the building. The executive sounded cautious. That could become expensive. Alexander looked at the black card resting beside his keyboard. So can ignoring problems. Later that day, he received a message from Rachel. It contained only a photograph of the bakery window. Someone had taped a handwritten note inside. Thank you for keeping 6 jobs here. Alexander stared at it longer than he expected. Then another message arrived. Rachel wrote, Mrs. Harper made the sign. I told her your lawyers only read a contract. Alexander replied, sometimes reading the right sentence matters. Rachel smiled when she saw it. That evening, after closing, she walked Lily home through cold but clear streets. The snowbanks had started shrinking into gray edges along the curb. Lily held her mittened hand and talked about a school project involving planets. Rachel listened until Lily suddenly asked, "Mom, are we poor?" Rachel slowed. "Why would you ask that?" "Because Tyler said people who take the bus are poor." Rachel looked at her daughter beneath the streetlight. "We do not have as much money as some people." "Is that bad?" Rachel thought about the black card, the cereal left on the pharmacy shelf, Mrs. Harper crying behind the register, Alexander asking what happened to workers no one had included in a spreadsheet. "No," she said, "but it can make some things harder." Lily considered that. "Are we okay?" Rachel squeezed her hand. "Yes, we are okay." For the first time in months, she believed it without having to force the words. The next Monday, Alexander came into the bakery just before closing. No driver waited outside. No assistant followed him. He ordered coffee, paid for it, and sat near the window until Rachel finished wiping the counter. "You are becoming predictable," she said. "That sounds dangerous." "For a billionaire, probably." He smiled. Then his expression turned serious. "I took your advice." Rachel leaned against the counter. "Which part?" "The part about not noticing only you." He told her about the contract review, the workers, the questions he had started asking. Rachel listened carefully. "And what did you find?" "That I built systems I understood financially and never bothered to understand personally." She said nothing. Alexander looked down at his coffee. "I thought returning your wallet was the unusual thing." Rachel waited. He looked back at her. "It was not. The unusual thing was that you had so little reason to trust the world, and you still chose to be honest with it." Alexander's words stayed with Rachel after he left, not because they sounded flattering, but because they made her uncomfortable in a way she could not immediately explain. She had never thought of herself as especially honest. She returned what was not hers. She paid what she could. She worked the shifts she agreed to work. Those things felt ordinary. Maybe that was the problem. Too many people had started treating ordinary decency like something rare. The next morning, Mrs. Harper called Rachel into the small office behind the kitchen. A yellow legal pad covered most of the desk. "I want to talk about your hours," she said. Rachel's stomach tightened automatically. Did something happen? Something good for once. Mrs. Harper turned the pad around. "Now that the rent issue is settled, I can finally stop planning around disaster. I need someone to take more responsibility on weekday mornings. Ordering, scheduling, vendor calls, training new hires." Rachel looked at the numbers. "You mean assistant manager work?" "That is exactly what I mean." Rachel almost laughed from disbelief. "I do not have management experience." "You have been managing half this place without the title for 2 years. Mrs. Harper tapped the page. "And I can add $3 an hour to start." $3. Rachel felt the number before she understood it. $3 meant milk without checking the bank balance first. It meant gas above a quarter tank. It meant maybe replacing the heater in the Ford before next winter. "Why now?" Rachel asked. Mrs. Harper's expression softened. "Because I was so busy trying to keep the doors open that I stopped noticing who was helping me hold them up." Rachel looked down. The sentence sounded familiar in a different form. "I need to think about it." Of course. At Grantwell Tower, Alexander's review was creating less comfortable conversations. Department heads arrived with spreadsheets explaining why contract labor had always been handled a certain way. Alexander listened to all of them. Then he asked questions they were not used to hearing. How many workers lost hours when events were canceled? How many waited 60 days for reimbursement? How many had no clear process for emergency assistance? One executive finally said, "We are not a social service agency." Alexander did not raise his voice. "No, we are an employer and a client. That still makes our choices matter." By Thursday, the company approved a pilot program across 3 Boston properties. Contractors would be required to provide clearer schedules, faster reimbursement, and an emergency assistance process funded jointly with Grantwell. It was not perfect. Alexander refused to pretend it was. But it was a start. That evening, he stopped at the bakery and found Rachel studying a supplier invoice at the counter. "You look busy," he said. "I am apparently being considered for management." "Apparently." "Mrs. Harper offered me assistant manager." Alexander smiled. "Congratulations." "I have not said yes." "Why not?" Rachel folded the invoice. "Because saying yes means admitting I might be ready for something better." That sounds like a strange thing to fear. Easy for you to say. She regretted it immediately, but Alexander only nodded. Probably. Rachel looked at him more closely. Do you ever worry that good things disappear faster when you start depending on them? He was quiet for a moment. Yes. She had not expected that answer. Alexander glanced toward the empty tables. My mother got sick when I was 14. Before that, I thought certain things in life were permanent because they had always been there. Rachel thought of the Polaroid. The picture in your wallet. That was taken the summer before everything changed. His voice stayed steady, but softer. After she died, I started believing control was safer than trust. If I could measure something, own it, insure it, plan for it, then maybe I could not lose it. Rachel leaned against the counter. Did it work? Alexander gave a faint smile. You met me standing in a snowstorm because I lost my wallet. She laughed quietly. Then the room settled again. I think I am going to take the job, Rachel said. Because of me? No. Her answer came immediately. Because Mrs. Harper asked me. Because I earned it. And because I am tired of treating survival like it is the highest thing I am allowed to want. Alexander looked at her with something close to admiration, but he did not turn it into praise. That sounds like a good reason. Rachel nodded. For the first time, accepting something better did not feel like owing someone. It felt like choosing forward. By the following Monday, Rachel's name had been printed beneath a new line on the bakery schedule. Assistant manager. The title looked almost too formal taped beside the espresso machine, but the work felt familiar. She checked deliveries before sunrise, showed Ben how to reconcile the register, called a flour supplier about a pricing mistake, and still stepped behind the counter when the morning rush filled every table. Nothing about the promotion made life suddenly easy. Her alarm still went off before 6. The Ford still made a clicking sound when the temperature dropped. Lily still needed help finding missing socks 5 minutes before school. But the numbers had changed just enough to create breathing room. Rachel bought milk without calculating the balance first. She filled the gas tank halfway instead of stopping at $8. On Tuesday, she replaced the cracked sole of her winter boots instead of wrapping the inside with tape. Small things. Quiet things. The kind of changes no one photographed. Across the city, Alexander was learning that changing a system was slower than writing a check. The first Grantwell pilot reports arrived on his desk with more problems than successes. One contractor claimed the new scheduling requirement was too complicated. Another had created an emergency assistance form so confusing that workers were abandoning it halfway through. Alexander could have ordered everyone to fix it by Friday. Instead, he asked 2 overnight custodians, a security guard, and a maintenance technician to sit in on the next review. His executives looked surprised when the workers entered the conference room. Alexander noticed that, too. We keep designing policies for people who are not in the room, he said. That ends here. A custodian named Denise pointed out that the application required access to a printer many night workers did not have. A security guard named Marcus explained that reimbursement delays mattered most at the end of the month, when rent and utilities arrived together. Alexander listened and took notes. No speeches. No promises that everything would be perfect. Just questions followed by changes. That evening, he stopped at the bakery later than usual. Rachel was behind the counter checking inventory, while Lily sat at a corner table coloring a worksheet about the solar system. You brought company, Alexander said. Rachel glanced toward her daughter. Mrs. Ellis had a doctor appointment. Lily looked up immediately. You are the wallet man. Alexander blinked. Rachel covered her face for half a second. I am sorry. Do not be. He walked toward the table. I have been called worse. Lily studied him seriously. Did my mom really find your special card? She did. Was it worth $1 million? No. Alexander considered the question. But I treated it like it was. Lily pointed a purple crayon at him. Mom says money is only useful if you use it right. Rachel looked over. I said that once. You say lots of things once. Alexander smiled. He sat down across from Lily while Rachel finished the inventory sheet. What are you drawing? Saturn. But the rings are hard. Most important things are harder than they look. Rachel glanced at him. That sounds suspiciously philosophical for someone who came in for coffee. I have been practicing. She laughed under her breath. Later, after Lily packed her crayons, Rachel walked Alexander toward the door. The street outside was cold but clear, the last dirty snow pushed into thin piles near the curb. How is the worker program? She asked. Messy. Good. Alexander frowned. Good. If it is messy, you are probably seeing the real problems now. He considered that. 6 months ago, I would have hated that answer. You still look like you hate it a little. I am improving slowly. Rachel smiled. Then Alexander reached into his coat and held up the black wallet. I have started checking for it before I leave anywhere. Growth. Apparently. He opened it briefly, and Rachel saw the black card in its familiar slot. Behind it, protected inside the hidden pocket, was the faded Polaroid of his mother. Alexander looked at the photograph, then closed the wallet. I used to think losing this meant I was careless. And now? He looked through the bakery window at Lily waiting beside the counter, then back at Rachel. Now I think finding out what mattered inside it was the part one needed. 6 months later, the bakery windows stood open to a mild Boston afternoon, letting in the smell of rain, traffic, and fresh bread. Rachel stood behind the counter wearing a navy cardigan over her work shirt, an assistant manager badge clipped near her collar. She was reviewing next week's schedule when Lily came through the door carrying a construction paper model of Saturn from school. Do not bend the rings, Lily announced. Rachel smiled. I would not dare. Life had not become luxurious. The Ford was still old, though its heater finally worked. Their apartment was still small. Rachel still compared grocery prices and kept coupons in the kitchen drawer. But the electric bill was no longer folded beneath a stack of envelopes because she was afraid to open it. There was milk in the refrigerator. Lily had new winter boots waiting in the closet even though snow was months away. More importantly, Rachel no longer measured every week by what might go wrong before Friday. Mrs. Harper had raised her pay again after Rachel completed a local small business management course at night. Ben had graduated from community college. Maria had moved into a better apartment, but still worked Sundays because, as she said, no one else made the cinnamon glaze correctly. The bakery had survived without becoming something unrecognizable. Across town, Grantwell Holdings had changed in quieter ways. The pilot Alexander started had expanded to every major property the company managed. Emergency assistance forms could now be completed on a phone. Reimbursements were processed within 10 business days. Contract proposals included schedule stability, benefits, and worker retention alongside cost. Some executives had resisted. Some contractors had complained. Alexander listened anyway. He had learned that kindness inside a corporation rarely looked dramatic. Most of the time, it looked like someone asking one more question before approving a spreadsheet. Late that afternoon, the bakery door opened and Alexander walked in without an entourage. He still wore an expensive charcoal suit, but he carried his own coffee tumbler and waited while Rachel finished helping a customer. Lily spotted him first. Wallet man. Alexander sighed. 6 months and I still do not have a better name? You could lose something else. I am trying very hard not to. Rachel laughed as he reached the counter. The usual? Please. She poured his coffee while Lily returned to a table near the window. Alexander placed his wallet beside the register to take out cash. Rachel immediately noticed the black card. Still carrying that thing? Apparently, I am emotionally attached now. That sounds unhealthy. Alexander opened the wallet. The black card sat in front, clean and nearly untouched. Behind it was the faded Polaroid of his mother, protected inside a clear sleeve. He removed the photograph carefully. I had this restored, he said. The colors were clearer now. A younger Alexander stood beside his mother near the cape, both of them leaning into the wind. Rachel looked at it, then at him. She looks happy. She was. He paused. So was I. Rachel handed the photograph back. Alexander slid it behind the card again. You know what is strange? He asked. There are many possible answers. He smiled. I spent years thinking that card represented security. Access. Control. If something happened, I could pay for the solution. Rachel rested her hands on the counter. And now? Alexander looked around the bakery. Mrs. Harper was laughing with a supplier near the kitchen. Lily was showing Saturn to a customer who had made the mistake of asking one question about space. Ben's graduation photograph hung beside the register. Ordinary people. Ordinary lives. None of them fixed by a miracle. Just given room to continue. Alexander touched the edge of the wallet. Now I think this was the valuable part. He tapped the black card. Then he looked at Rachel. And I was wrong. She raised an eyebrow. Do not get sentimental on me. I am trying to grow. Slowly. Very slowly. He laughed, and Rachel did too. Outside, the afternoon light turned the wet sidewalk gold. 6 months earlier, she had stood in the cold holding something that could have bought almost anything she needed. She returned it because it was not hers. What came back to her was not a fortune. It was steadier work, a stronger voice, and proof that doing the right thing did not have to make her invisible. Alexander had received his wallet, his card, and the photograph he feared losing. But the thing Rachel truly returned to him could not fit inside leather or carry a credit limit. She gave him back the belief that decency still existed when no one was watching, and he had finally learned that the best way to repay kindness was not to own it, reward it, or control it, but to let it change the way he treated everyone who came after.